Thank you, and thank you for holding this hearing. And Chief Tidwell, thank you for being here today. Obviously, the health and vitality of American forests are particularly interesting to people in our state after we suffered two of the worst fires a few years ago. And I don't see how the President's budget even begins to enable some of the Forest Service to fulfill its motto of caring for the land and serving the people. This budget would not improve the health of our land nor enable you as Chief to provide the greatest benefit to our citizens. So I know that I read an article just yesterday that said, quote, Zinke and Perdue, meaning our two Secretaries of Agriculture and Interior, embrace status quo on fire policy, end quote. I can't imagine a universe where anyone thinks that status quo at the Forest Service is acceptable, particularly in regards to the fires that we've been facing. The National Academy of Science has been very specific on this in an article they published showing that the current approach, the Trump administration approach, simply falls short in the new era of intense fires that we are now facing. Treating our forests can reduce the amount of carbon released into the atmosphere, and scientists are also telling us that the increased carbon levels causing climate change and extreme weather are major drivers of the fires we are experiencing today. So as you know, we're caught in this very vicious cycle. But what's even more stressful is that, quote, the status quo of the President's budget proposal is to use money that would pay for things that we could do up front, like thinning and controlled burns, and instead are trying to use that dollar to extract fossil fuels on public lands. So during our listening session in my state, places like Colville, Wenatchee, and Spokane, I've heard the same thing. Quote, the science says that we should be focusing our nation's attention on funding and getting ahead of the fire problem, end quote. So I want to highlight a couple of the things in the President's proposed budget reducing funding for firefighting. This budget proposes to decrease almost $300 million from fighting forest fires and another decrease of $50 million for preventing wildfires. But the most troubling part of the President's proposal is the practice of using the 10-year average to budget for wildfires. Neither the President nor Congress has used the 10-year average to budget for the firefighting since 2015. And my colleague here, the chair of this committee, and also in her role as appropriation, provided enough money in each year's budget to give the Forest Service the dollars that needed to fight the fires without robbing from these important programs. But despite these efforts, we've heard just this month the Forest Service scientists are saying that there's a 50% chance we'll run out of the firefighting money this year, even though we've set aside some $1.6 billion for fire suppression. So if that happens, the Forest Service will be back in the inevitable position of borrowing from programs to get firefighters to the line, make sure that we have the equipment and supplies we need to protect our communities. And this budget, which goes in the opposite direction and proposes cutting another $300 million from fire suppression, is not the direction we need to go. So I hope that today we can discuss these important issues. We need better protection of our communities and firefighters. We need to make real investments that will make our forests more resilient. We need to use our resources more efficiently and things like hasty response. Hasty response are tools that help the community respond faster. I know you know this because you've heard from many people in our state. Ideas like the Pine Pilot help us reduce fuel and put money into things like cross-laminated timber. And I also don't understand the prohibition in this budget on the Land and Water Conservation Fund. The Forest Service uses the Land and Water Conservation Fund to make the working forests help maintain our rural jobs and stabilize our forests and product infrastructure. So I don't understand that prohibition. Obviously, I could go on and on about the recreation economy and how important those things go together with our national forests. They stimulate our economy, they give people access, and we need to continue to make investments in that infrastructure. So it almost is like, Chief Tidwell, I can't decide what I should focus more on in this budget proposal. I could have talked about how we don't see any interest here in the secure rural school program. I see my colleague from Oregon is here. I'm sure he will mention that. I could have talked about the proposal to zero out the legacy road and trail programs, which we use in our state. I could have talked about the elimination of funding for collaboratives. My colleague and I had a chance to have breakfast a week ago with the Secretary of Ag, and he's told me he just came back from the Pacific Northwest and heard what great things collaboratives were, and that we had to do more of them, and then here we are in this budget fix of not focusing on them. So anyway, lots to talk about. I'm sure we'll get a chance in the Q&A, and again, sorry for my delay, Madam Chair, this morning, but this is such an important hearing. I'm glad we're having it, and look forward to having a chance to ask questions of these of our witnesses and Chief Tidwell, and I thank him for his service.